Japan makes me scared. こんばんは皆さん。Welcome back to another episode of Japan Makes Me Scared. I'm Junpei, your host, and I'm going to share various horror and scary stories of Kaidan in this podcast. So the question of the day, when somebody's missing, what do you think would be the cause? I guess most people would think it is about personal problems like relationships, money, or could be external factors like kidnapping or murder at worst. But for Japanese people, there's one more option, which is Kamikakushi. That's the topic of the day. So today's episode is going to be more like a complete guide to understand what Kamikakushi is, with some deep dive analysis. So we explore the meanings, the story, and elements behind Kamikakushi, and uncover its mysteries. Alright, let's move on to the storytelling part. Episode 42, Kamikakushi. So, beginning of the beginning, let's look at the meaning of the word Kamikakushi. It combines two kanjis, kami, meaning spirit or god, and kakushi, meaning hidden. As the kanji suggest, Kamikakushi describes a phenomenon in which a person is hidden by the spirits. In Japan, when somebody suddenly vanished, people believe that they had been spirited away to another world by a divine force. That's the basic idea. Anyway, I think it's better for you to understand more with real-life storytelling, so let me share one typical Kamikakushi story here. First, let's think about a scene like this. A while ago, when Japan was still a closed-off village society surrounded by nature. Then young children, who were probably not even 10 years old, were playing near the mountains. What were they doing? It looks like they're playing kakurenbo, which means hide and seek in Japanese. You know, one child closed their eyes and counted to 10 and asked, "Mo ii kai?" meaning, "Are you ready?" Then the other children replied, "Mo ii yo," when they were ready. Well, times may change, but the way kakurenbo is played is timeless. It's the same now as it was in the past. Anyway, on that day, they were really into it, so before they knew it, it was around dusk, and it was gradually getting darker and darker. So they decided they would call it a day after their final game of kakurenbo. So the same things were repeated again. One child counted to 10 and asked, "Mo ii kai?" The children who had been hiding said, "Mo ii yo," and the game started again. And one by one, the children were found, but the last one were just too hard to find. Now let's call him Taro here for convenience. The children who had been found also searched for Taro together, but they couldn't find him. The area was getting darker and darker, and the children were starting to feel uneasy. Then one of the children said, "I'm sure Taro got bored of playing kakurenbo and went home alone." And the other children also kind of agree with this theory, and eventually they all went home. However, as you can probably imagine, Taro hadn't gone back home yet. This caused a panic for his parents, and eventually the adult villagers were also involved, and a huge search began in the mountains at night. Even so, Taro still couldn't be found. You know, the mountain at night is very dark without any light, so if you take one wrong step, you might get lost yourself. So the adults gave up on searching at night and decided to search a wide area when it got light. Then the next morning, the search began again, and after a while, a voice came from a distant light. "Hey, over here! We found Taro." In the end, Taro was found unharmed and safely rescued. His parents and the other villagers were also relieved, and well then, it was a happy ending. However, there was one thing that was caught up after all. There was a place where Taro was found. He was found a few kilometers away from the village, at the bottom of a valley, several tens of meters below the forest path. It was such a dangerous place that the adults had to use rope to support themselves to get down to Taro. You know, Taro could be an active boy, but it is still just a boy. So it is hard to believe that a boy of less than 10 years old would have been able to move along a dark mountain path at night without any light by himself. Also, when people asked Taro himself, he said that his memory was quite hazy from when he had played Kakurenbo until he was found. Some older villagers said Taro must have experienced Kamikakushi. Maybe a tengu or something was taken him. So that the mystery remains. Alright, that was a kind of template story of Kamikakushi. What do you think of that? But, you know, this is actually only one of the variations. I think there should be 4 main patterns in the Kamikakushi stories. So, let's analyze these 4 cases here. In the beginning, the persons got missing. That should be the must-have part to start the Kamikakushi story. Then the first turning point is whether the missing person comes back safely in the end, or not. You know, in the story that I shared, the boy Taro was found in the end. So, it matches with this pattern. Let's call this pattern A. We can still dig deeper into this pattern A. Then the second turning point is if they have memory while they're gone, or not. You know, some of them remember why they're missing, because according to some stories in this pattern, they often say they were taken by something like Tengu to another dimensional world. Well, we talk more about these mysterious entities later, but anyway, let's call it pattern A1. On the other hand, like the story that I shared, some people have no memory while they're missing for some reason. And from what I feel, this is a more common scenario in the Kamikakushi story. Anyway, let's call this pattern A2. Now get back to the first turning point. There are also stories where the missing person never comes back. That should be the pattern B. This pattern B can also be separated into 2 branches. They can be either found dead, suddenly, or never be found after all. So, in summary, we have these 4 patterns. A1, the missing person comes back with a memory. A2, the missing person comes back, but without memory. And B1, the missing person never comes back because they are found dead. And B2, the missing person never comes back because they are never found after all. I know it might sound a bit complicated, right? But to get used to it, we can think of a case of Spirited Away from Ghibli film. By the way, if you haven't watched this film yet, you've been under the rock. You know, this is a film from more than 20 years ago, so sorry about spoiler, but I will still go on. Anyway, Chihiro, you know, the main character, and her parents wander into a strange realm at the beginning of the film. That should be the must-have part at the start of Kamikakushi's story. You know, they were missing from the original world. Then the first turning point. Do they manage to return to the original world in the end? For those who've watched the film, it's an easy question, isn't it? The answer should be yes, so they should be going to A1 or A2. Then we focus on the memory there. I know there are several theories or analysis on the film's ending, but the memories of the otherworldly experience are most likely to be gone, I think. Then the case of Spirited Away film goes into the A2 category. You know, the missing person comes back with no memory. That's an exciting exercise, isn't it? Kamikakushi phenomena often involved other specific characters, settings, and conditions. Here's what's commonly involved. First, the key factor of Kamikakushi is a mystery of impossibility. That's right, isn't it? When people vanish, but you can still explain why and how, that would be simply missing people, not categorized as Kamikakushi, right? Kamikakushi is not just about disappearances. Stories often involve someone missing. It's often found in places that seem impossible to reach, like the story that I shared, or one of the other variations like someone's missing for days or weeks, or even years, but they look exactly the same when they come back. They still wear the same clothes, or they don't age at all, even after years of disappearance. These mysteries are what push simple missing people to the victims of Kamikakushi. Then the next factor will be, who actually performs Kamikakushi, taking someone to the other world? Do you remember what I said earlier about kanjis for Kamikakushi? It's kami, meaning spirits, and kakushi, meaning hidden. Because of the mystery of impossibility, people think there should be some supernatural or spirits involved in this. As a whole, we can call these spirits as kakuregami. So the question can be translated to, who are these kakuregami? Well, let me share some famous ones here. The most common one is tengu. Tengu is a human-shaped but bird-like creature often associated with mountains. They're often depicted with long noses and red faces. Tengu are kind of guardians of the mountains and are said to punish those who disrespect the sacredness there. Tengu is often believed to lure children, especially boys, into the mountains, either to play or as a test. So often, Kamikakushi stories with Tengu carry a positive message, with the children eventually returning unharmed, or getting some kind of education from Tengu. The next candidate is Kitsune. These fox spirits known for shapeshifting and trickery are said to disguise themselves to deceive humans. While Kitsune sometimes tease people, many stories about them are more humorous. It's like the missing person was invited to a drinking party with Kitsune, something like that. So similar to the Tengu Kamikakushi stories, Kitsune stories also have kind of positive vibes there. Then, where does the horror come from? That shift from the third one, Oni, which can be translated into demon in English. Oni is said to be kidnapping people for darker purposes, like making people into a spouse, or even worse, to eat them. If Oni is male, the target is usually a young woman, and if Oni is female, which is usually called Yamamba, their victims are often children or young men. Also, about the victims, there are characteristics of those who are more likely to be the victims of Kamikakushi. First, children are more prone to Kamikakushi, but that's not surprising, isn't it? Children are immature in terms of knowledge and experience when it comes to social life, and are more likely to get lost. Also, if an adult is not returning home for a day or so, it wouldn't be a major incident, right? But what if it's a kid? You can easily imagine that the gravity and urgency of the situation tend to increase if a child is gone even for a few hours. The other common target of Kamikakushi is young women. As mentioned earlier, there are many stories about young women being taken away by Oni and forced to become their wives. But that could be also based on the system in Japan in the past. Because, Japan had a strong patriarchal system, and women had less freedom than they do now. So I think it's highly likely that the desire to be freed from this system kind of made women more vulnerable to disappear or be taken away easily. Next, we can also discuss the common locations where Kamikakushi occurs. It is often around mountains and forests, but it doesn't have to be in these natural environments. The keyword is the boundary between this world to the other world. Since Kamikakushi is a transport from the real world to another world, it is thought to occur near the place that is considered to be the boundary between the two. In Japan, since ancient times, there has been a belief in nature, including mountain worship, and that should be why mountains and forests are the common locations. Then, what about the time? Actually, it's often around dusk when Kamikakushi happens. This is probably because in Japan, there is a belief that yokai, or spirits, who sleep in the other world during the day will appear in the darkness of the night. And dusk is the perfect time for them to take people away to the other world. Sorry to be boring, but thinking a little more rationally here as well. It may also be related to the fact that it is often in the evening or later that people realize that someone disappeared. Especially in the older days, there was no way to find out where someone was at anytime like there is now. So when they didn't come home in the evening, when they would normally have come home, it was only the point where people thought somebody might have been taken by Kamikakushi. The final factor is a situation when Kamikakushi occurs. This is often the case when someone was spotted, kind of isolated to some extent, just before missing. A prime example is, again, like the story that I shared, when children are playing kakurenbo, hide and seek. So it is like one of the hidden children disappearing. For this reason, back in the older days, some parents told their kids not to play kakurenbo, especially around the dusk time. Finally, we can talk about Kamikakushi in the modern time. Even today, we can't deny that people occasionally vanish under strange and mysterious circumstances, but those cases are not often attributed to Kamikakushi anymore. We got more advanced technology to locate people, so there will be fewer missing cases for that for sure. Plus, since we have less mountain worship or fear of the spiritual world, we don't really feel the boundary to another world anymore, especially in the city. Yet, Kamikakushi still remains in Japanese pop culture as well. The most famous tribute is Spirited Away from Ghibli, but there should be also a lot of references in other anime, manga, or films, or novels. Oshimai. Thank you very much for listening to the story. How'd you like it? To talk about my childhood a bit, Kamikakushi felt more like a positive experience than a horror one. Going to be invited to another world sounded like you're going on a fun adventure or something like that. But at the same time, I remember my grandma saying don't do kakurenbo around dusk time. So, at least for her generation, Kamikakushi must have felt closer, or more relatable to daily life at least. I think most of the kids, including me, didn't completely believe that we'd be taken by Tengu Oni, but we actually didn't do kakurenbo around that time. We're not brave enough and still afraid of tiny 0.001% of possibility that Kamikakushi was real. Especially when you're left alone while doing kakurenbo, you feel uneasy anyway, and your imagination sometimes goes in a bad direction in a way. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. This podcast, Japan Makes Me Scared, is available in all popular podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or Amazon Music. So hit the follow or like button on the app of your choice, and that will be a huge motivation for me. Also, if you want to talk with me or other kaiten lovers, you can join my Discord channel where you can share your thoughts and theories. I'm gonna leave the link in the description, so please join and enjoy the interaction if you would. We're getting closer to the end, so let me say one thing. ありがとうございます again for listening to my podcast, Japan Makes Me Scared, and さようなら for what you done first next time. Bye!